music is just by nature such a fun thing. I was getting really good results with the students, and they were playing songs that they loved, and they were sounding really good doing it. And if they were a kid, their parents were really happy because their kid was having fun with piano lessons. They weren't asking to quit. Just the fact that I was kind of just crazy for this business and always showed up like no matter what. And I know that with my own students too. If I bring the energy, they match it. One of the scariest parts so far was committing as a 24-year-old to a 4-year lease on a commercial building when I didn't know anything about business. I'm a piano player, I'm a musician. And so that was, once I signed it was like, all right, game on. We have over 20 teachers on our staff, and we have over 500 students that come weekly for a lesson. I can tell you from my experience, it's the passion. That is something that if you have it in you, then run with it.
I'm Darian.
I'm Elena, and this is our podcast, Step into Success,
where we give you an inside look at how people are currently creating success in their respective fields.
Our mission is to bring you into the trenches for an inside view and hopefully give some inspiration and knowledge as you work towards success in your own way.
Welcome to another episode of Step into Success podcast. Today, our guest is Anthony Sardini. He is the owner and founder of Accurate Performance Music Studio in Erie, Pennsylvania. I'll let Anthony introduce himself and tell more, but Anthony, thanks a lot for being on the show. Excited for the conversation. Just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Happy to be here with you today. So yeah, I'm Anthony Sardini, and I own the Accurate Performance School of Music in Erie, Pennsylvania. And we're a private music school that does lessons, training, and classes on pretty much all different musical instruments and all different styles, ages, abilities. And this is our 10th year in business now this year.
Wow, that's exciting. I was going to ask you, because I feel like it's been a while that you've been in business, but that was my next question. Actually was like how long you've been in business. So 10 years, very exciting. What inspired you to turn this into a business, to get started?
Really, it was, I had my own thing going where I was teaching private lessons, just myself. I would teach at my local church. I would go to my customers' houses. I would taught at a local music store, all kind of at the same time. And it really, my own personal clientele really built so much that I needed a space that people could come to me for their lessons. And so that was kind of where it all began, was bringing my clients and getting them to come to this new physical location, this studio that I had founded.
Very interesting. So were you drawn to entrepreneurship beforehand, or was it just kind of out of that necessity of, wow, my client, I have so many clients that I need a space, I don't have a choice, or was it a little bit of both?
It was more of the second one. It was more of just, it kind of just happened and snowballed, and it got to the point where I really needed to make a move. And as far as entrepreneurship goes, I'm not even sure I knew what an entrepreneur was when I started. It was just a few years going into it. It's like people kept saying that to me. I was like, oh, I guess that's me now, because I was, a piano teacher before, not an entrepreneur. And but my first taste of entrepreneurship was probably when I was much younger. I was probably 12 years old, and I remember my grandmother called me and said, Anthony, how would you like a job? And I was like, all right, sounds cool, can make some money. And she wanted to know if I would cut her grass for her every week in the summertime. Okay. And so I'm cutting her grass like first or second week of the job, and all of a sudden her neighbor runs over and is like waving me down, and I stop the lawnmower, talk to the neighbor, and the neighbor's like, after you're done, can you come cut my lawn too? And I was like, all right, sure, I can do that. And then I kind of got this itch for like, wait a second, like I can kind of choose, how much time I want to spend, how much money I can make. And so at that point I got a little greedy. I called my other grandparents and I'm like, hey, do you guys need anybody to mow your lawn? But so yeah, that was my first sort of taste of entrepreneurship, really owning my own schedule, owning my own income, and of course, having the pride of a job well done when you look at the lawn afterwards. But that was really the first taste of kind of having my own business. But I didn't really know anything about business or entrepreneurship at that time. And then again, starting the private lessons later on, it kind of found me, I guess, and kept growing and growing to the point that I needed to open a place. What happened was in high school, I was kind of known as the piano kid, and a lot of my classmates would ask me to teach them how to play the piano. And so I would meet them at their church, or they would come to my house and I would give them their lessons. Well, they liked it so much they would tell our other classmates, and then I had this like clientele at school, and they would tell their parents would tell their friends, and over the years it just got so big, it was like, okay, it's time to kind of make this like a real thing now and not just me driving all over town teaching lessons.
Interesting. That's really cool how that started. So when you started teaching the lessons in high school, and then what age were you when you made the business like official, so to speak?
My first piano lessons when I was 16, and I opened the business, the physical location of the business, when I was 24.
So you had some time to build your clientele, your students, and then how did you, when you first started teaching, did you notice like how you kind of grew and developed in those 8 years that made you feel more confident of like, I can actually, make this happen as an actual business? Because isn't it kind of different to just be teaching one-on-one to like now business ownership, location to manage, rent to pay? It's a little different. How did that transformation happen for you?
Yeah, totally different. So first of all, when I started teaching lessons when I was a teenager, I taught lessons the way that I was taught lessons. So I just pretty much emulated the teachers that I had previously and just did what I knew. The problem was I realized a lot of my students weren't necessarily having fun or enjoying it or sticking with it. Like a student would quit, and that really bothered me because I was thinking, wow, like I'm sure I can show you how to do this, but it wasn't connecting for some reason. So a couple years into it, I eventually strayed away from what I had known to be like the music lesson experience and created my own way of doing things. And it was at that point that I was getting really good results with the students, and they were playing songs that they loved, and they were sounding really good doing it. And if they were a kid, their parents were really happy because their kid was having fun with piano lessons. They weren't asking to quit. Yeah, they were having fun, and they were playing songs that their friends knew, that their parents knew, and they were really feeling like a musician at that point, not just a piano student or a guitar student. They were feeling like they were doing it. Now, when it comes to running the business, that was a whole different animal because, yes, I found a building, and in our location that we're in now, it wasn't the original spot we had picked. We picked a much smaller location, same plaza, but a different building. But I was concerned it was going to be a little bit too small because I thought as long as I was opening my own studio, maybe I could have a place big enough to have other instructors join me, and we could have a team of music teachers. So the place I picked originally was a little bit smaller, and my real estate agent was like, well, how about that place in the middle? And it was about twice the size of the first place, and all I'm seeing is, the rent cost and how much higher it's going to be. So we worked out a deal where it would start out at the price of the smaller building, and then every year it would work up to the price of the bigger building, but I could start in the bigger building. And so that's kind of how that went. That was my first real taste of, the rent, the lease, those sorts of things. But opening the business wasn't just, I kind of thought I'd open a music school and it would be just playing piano all the time. But, eventually it's like, you got to stock the bathroom, right? You got to clean, you got to make sure the equipment is good. You have to answer phone calls. All these other things came along with it, and I was not prepared for that when I first started. But fortunately, that sort of snowballed, and I was able to figure it out along the way.
So because a minute ago you said that you didn't really know a lot about business, right? You just had a passion for the music and teaching the lessons. Did you have anyone that helped you when it came to like you're looking at rent, you're looking at these, the building, you're looking at doing these different things? Did you have anyone that helped you, or were you kind of doing this all on your own?
It was really, really on my own for most of it. I mean, I consulted with my family, and I spoke to my parents about it at the time because I was, very young, my young 20s. So I mentioned it to them, and their thought process was like, that lease is a long time. That lease was going to be a 4-year lease when I first signed it, and at 24 years old, that's a big chunk of your life. And so they were like, oh, that lease is a little bit long. I don't know if I would do it. And then I mentioned it to one of my friends, and he's like, oh, that rent price is just so high. Like, I don't think I would do it. And then finally I talked to my brother, and he's like, you know what? Just do it. He's like, you'll figure it out. And all it took was that one little nudge. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I remember when I got to the realtor's office to sign the lease, I got all the way through the lease, and I had the pen in my hand on the signature line. And it took me probably 15 minutes to actually get the courage to sign my name on this lease for this 4-year deal. And that was one of the scariest parts so far, was committing as a 24-year-old to a 4-year lease on a commercial building when I didn't know anything about business. I'm a piano player, I'm a musician. And so that was, once I signed it, it was like, all right, game on. You got to make this work at least 4 years. And then after 4 years, you can go do something else. But at least make it 4 years. And then 4 years came and went. And they were like, do you want to re-sign the lease? And I barely even read it. I just signed it. It was like, yes, please, keep going, because I need it. I need the space.
Wow. That is very interesting to hear how one person could help you just make that nudge, push you to just do it. So do you think that like it was something inside of you that you really wanted to do it, and then everybody else is like naysaying just didn't quite matter?
I think I knew inside that I had to do something. There had to be a move to be made, because there was this opportunity that I saw, and it was either just keep doing what you're doing or take the step forward and hopefully get to a new level. And so I knew that that's really what I wanted to do. And all it took was just one other person to see it. So I just knew I wasn't completely crazy. And fortunately that happened and gave me that little nudge that I needed.
So for people out there in the audience that are listening and maybe contemplating about starting their own business, or they have a passion and they don't know if they should like pursue it into business or whatever, in your opinion, what's more important? Having a strong passion and pursuing that, or having a better understanding of like business fundamentals?
Well, I can tell you from my experience, it's the passion. And I feel like if you have the passion, the rest you can figure out. You can research, you can learn, you can consult with other people that have done it before. There are plenty of resources in the world to learn sort of the nuts and bolts of business. But passion is something that is hard to teach and learn. That is something that if you have it in you, then run with it. And the other thing is too is, it's great to have a hobby too, and you do have to be careful not to try to make every hobby a business either, because one thing I did find is there are points where you're like, I love playing music, I love playing the piano, but once it becomes your job, it's a little bit of a different animal, right? It's like if I'm teaching, coaching musicians all day long, it's not always, a desire to now go and practice myself at the end of the day. It's kind of like, all right, I've had plenty of music for the day and that was great, and I'll get more tomorrow. So when you're chasing a hobby or turning it into a business, I would just say, make sure you still keep the passion for yourself as well, and don't just make it all about business all the time.
How do you balance that within yourself, especially having a whole school where I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine your days are pretty long just because there's only so many students you can have, there's only so many hours in the day. It's got to stay pretty full, right? So how do you keep that passion alive for yourself and your own, musicianship?
What's been really fun for me over this journey is that I have a large team of instructors now with me. And so my role has sort of shifted from teaching not only my own personal students, but also teaching the staff on how to be really good teachers and music coaches too. And so I've found sort of a new niche that I really enjoy, and that's in coaching teachers on how to be really good and effective coaches. And so that's been something that's been a new level of motivation and excitement and passion for me. But just as much, I still love teaching the beginner piano lessons or the beginner guitar lessons, or working with a singer that's advanced that wants to work on recording some music videos. Like, I still love being in that part of the business as well. So it's just having a couple different hats that I wear throughout the day. And I have my days carved out so that I'm sort of in teacher mode for a period of time, and then I'm in leadership mode for a period of time. I'm always in leadership mode. That one's always in the background. Just, you never know what's going to come up or happen. But I really do try to block out my days so that I'm with my clients for certain hours, with my staff for certain hours, and then by myself for certain hours where I can game plan and reflect and review the day and the week ahead as well. So it's just, the calendar is very important when it comes to how to balance those sorts of things.
Yeah, I bet. I think that a lot of entrepreneurs they struggle with that, or at least in the beginning, of how to manage their time effectively, because you do have to wear so many different hats. So I like that perspective of kind of chunking out the day, because sometimes one mindset that you need for one task is totally different than the mindset you need to be in for another task. So by delegating that, I think that's actually really insightful.
Yeah, and that's what's
So-
worked for me and I've also found it's better for me to do my personal things within the business first thing of the day. If I can get that over with first, where it's the things that's just up to me to get done and take care of, that's great, because once we open and there's people around, it's like I'm talking to people, I'm spending time with my students, I'm training a teacher, I'm just listening to and watching the overall flow of things. So once people come around, it's like it's hard to get that background work done. So it's really important to me to get that done before anybody else arrives, and then get to the people part when everybody else is there.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Anthony, real quick, going back to something that you talked about earlier, and as far as your business specifically goes, you said when you first started really doing this for business, you were teaching the way that you had been taught, and you were doing the same type of stuff that your teachers had done, and you noticed that you were losing some students, and you made some shifts and made it more fun for your students. Can you walk us through kind of your mindset, that process, and how that innovation came to be?
To this day, when parents call our studio and sign up their kids for lessons, so often we hear the parent say, I took lessons as a kid and I quit, and I wish I had never quit. And
Okay.
I hear it all the time. And to me, it's like,
That's how I feel.
yeah. And so many people just have that experience of trying out the guitar or the piano, and it just wasn't for them. When really, I think maybe the teacher wasn't for them. Maybe it was the way they were being taught, because music is just by nature such a fun thing. Like, everybody loves music, and I tell my staff, we're not here to teach people to love music. We're here to teach them how to continue and grow their love of music, because music is just this almost innate thing that everybody just loves already. And so when I was getting these phone calls from these parents about how they quit when they were a kid, or when my students in the early days, when they were like, I'm bored, I don't want to play anymore, this isn't fun, I knew that there was way more out there because of how much fun I was having with music. Music has been such a great part of my life, and I knew that there was something that I experienced and understood that they weren't understanding yet. And so I went to set out to, how can I communicate kind of what I know and the fun that I'm having with those students, so that the switch flips for them and they feel like, all right, like, this is cool. I am becoming passionate about this, and I can do this, and I'm a musician now, and not just this student that has to show up to the piano lesson every week. So to me, it was trying to connect those dots of not just taking lessons, but how to actually make a sound that sounds really good and that you recognize and enjoy and your friends think is really cool, because that always helps if others motivate you and are into it. So that was really the process. Was, I wasn't just going to quit because I didn't seem to be an effective teacher. I wanted to learn how to become an effective teacher and how to make those students feel the passion that I felt for music. And then once it clicks, it's like, I have students that have been with me for 10 plus years that started when they were 4 or 5 years old. Now they're teenagers, and they still come every single week for their lesson. All it needs is one little click, one moment, and it's like, now they're in it. Now they're a musician. Now they see the trajectory, and it really is life-changing, because those people will play music forever, just like I still play and practice music.
Right. Anthony, this might be a difficult question for you to answer, because you seem like a genuinely really nice, humble guy. But my question is, how much do you credit your passion that you have for kind of rubbing off on your students? Because I'm sure there's teachers out there that are professional teachers, but they may not love it the same way, right? And their students probably pick up on that energy. How much, or how important do you think it is that your passion kind of, rubs off on your students to help them increase their passion for it?
Oh yeah, it's really important. And I think energy in general is contagious from person to person. And I'm telling my teachers all the time, like, I understand we all have things that happen in life outside of work, but I always encourage them, just take a deep breath before you walk into the building, refresh yourself, because the moment you come in, your student is noticing. Are you on time? Are you happy to be here? Are you energetic? Are you encouraging? Because the students do feel that. I know that with my own students too. If I bring the energy, they match it. And that passion is something that I really think the coach or the teacher has to have if they're going to, really mold the students into passionate people as well for their craft.
So you've mentioned a few things that kind of differentiate your school of music from maybe others throughout this in your hometown and just throughout the nation. Are there any other factors that you attribute to your success? I know you had said like those first 4 years just kind of came and went. How do you think you were able to maintain success, especially early on in the beginning through those first 4 years?
The biggest thing I can tell you first off is my consistency in my work. There was a period of time for the first few years that I just showed up day after day after day. And maybe it wasn't the best sometimes because I might be a little sick or something, might be wrong. I didn't want to get any students sick, of course, but I showed up. And I think that consistent schedule, showing my students that I was serious about it, allowed them to be more serious about it too. And I'm telling my staff this all the time, like consistency is key when it comes to the appointment business. You have to keep showing up. It's difficult enough to motivate people already to like want to succeed and practice and work hard. It's even harder if you're doing that, but every other week you're like, hey, can we reschedule? Hey, can we reschedule? Can we cancel? So those are kind of bad words in my book. Unless it's an emergency, we really don't want to have to reschedule or cancel, or if it's, well in advance with plenty of notice. Otherwise, our customers need to be able to count on us to show up. So I think part of that initial success was just the fact that I was kind of just crazy for this business and always showed up like no matter what. There were even days when we first opened, people were like, hey, will you be closed for Labor Day or Memorial Day? And I'm like, I don't think so. Like, I'm pretty sure I'll be around. I'm here if you're here. But now we take, as it's grown, we now gladly take those holidays off and give the students and teachers a break. But at first I was like, nope, I'll work, I'll do it. And so I think that consistency of just showing up, day after day really helped to that initial success. And then instilling that consistency in my staff has helped to grow the school overall. Now we have over 20 teachers on our staff, and we have over 500 students that come weekly for a lesson. So it's quite a machine to keep going and pulling forward.
Yeah, I'll bet. That's quite a few students. Over 500, you said. Wow. So how do you maintain a schedule like that? Both your staff's availability, just the physical availability in the space, and then scheduling all of those students. Like, do you handle all of that? Do you have some assistance with scheduling?
Yeah, I do have. I have 3 really great administrators now, which is extra fun for me because it's like a whole new branch of the business that I didn't have the luxury of having for the first probably 8 years or so. Because really, for the first 8 years, it was really just me and my own cell phone. And I would take my phone was my business phone, my personal phone. And so, I could get a call at 6 a.m. and it could be my mother, it could be a customer. I have no idea who's calling my phone. Is it an emergency or what's going on? And then finally, one of my customers who also owns a business shared with me how he purchased a business phone, has a business cell phone and a personal cell phone, which sounds kind of basic now as I look back, but back then I only knew one phone. And so now we have the business phone, and we have 3 wonderful administrators that are in charge of the booking, the billing, the communications with customers, those sorts of things. And it really feels like a luxury for me because the business didn't start that way. So I extra appreciate having the help for all the bookkeeping and things like that. But yeah, they're a great crew, the administrators, and they help to keep the schedules in shape as well. So when we hire an instructor, we go through an observation and training period, and we agree to what their schedule is going to be. We have some instructors that are part-time teachers. We have some instructors that are full-time teachers. But we pick a schedule. Once they give us our schedule, we all have a shared program that we can view that schedule on. So the teachers can see their schedules, admin can see their schedules, I can see their schedules, and that really helps to keep everybody on the same page, literally.
Hey, Anthony, real quick, if you can, I want to go back in time a little bit to when you first started hiring people to work for you. So you've built this business, you signed the lease, you're in this place, it's your passion, you've been doing it since high school. What was it like sharing that responsibility with someone for the first time? When did you know it was the right moment to do? And what was turning the reins over to someone else a little bit, sharing in the responsibility like for you?
I always knew from the beginning of starting this business that I wanted to have other people join me on the staff. The building was just way too big for just me. So the idea was to bring in other people and have this team of music teachers. And I remember when we first opened the business, the first piece of equipment I ever bought was a motif keyboard. And so I went to this person's house. I found it on Marketplace. I went to this person's house to buy it. And this guy was selling it because his wife plays the piano. And I was like, wait a second, your wife plays the piano. Is she pretty good? She still play? And he's like, yeah. I said, would she like to teach? And so he's like, I don't know. I'll have her call you. And so she called me and said she would like to teach, and she joined us. So that was the extent of our hiring process back on day one.
Nice.
I wouldn't recommend that to your listeners. That's not a good way to go.
Hey, sometimes things work out like that, though, right?
She turned out to be a great teacher. She's one of the best for a
Did
couple
she do
years.
a good job?
What's that?
Did she do a good job?
She did a really good job. Yeah, she was with us for a couple of years, and then she moved across the country for family stuff. So, but she was great, and I was very fortunate when I first hired to actually work out really well. But I had this misconception that it all would be that easy. So that's how I hired the next few. And yeah, I had this sort of expectation for no good reason that when I hired a teacher that they would be like a good teacher and do a good job. And that's when I learned that, okay, if I'm going to have a staff, I have to be able to work with these people and teach them and guide them and make sure they have the tools that they need, make sure they have the personalities and the talent. Because at first it wasn't that hard to get in. And now it's definitely a more extensive process. Now when we hire somebody, it's definitely a multiple interview process. And then we have a period of observations where they get to observe the staff and kind of learn the ways of the studio. And then they do practice lessons and we observe them. So it's definitely more intricate than just, hey, do you play the piano?
Nice.
Yeah, it's interesting, just kind of how things evolve. Do you find that as you continue to grow, you are having to really refine those processes more and more?
Oh yeah, absolutely. One thing that I'm really learning is the more people are involved, the more intricate and detailed your plans have to be. When it was just me and like 3 other teachers, it wasn't that hard to communicate. But now to have over 20 staff members, the planning and preparation is definitely way more refined. And I feel a bit like a broken record sometimes to my staff because I'm always saying the same important things over and over again. But I do believe that repetition is just important, and I never want there to be a doubt in their mind of, what they're to do in certain situations or how our day-to-day operations are. So absolutely, the process has become more refined as the company has grown to more and more people, because I can't just say something one time and expect 20 people to remember it. So we put things in writing. Once in a while, I'll have the team just sign certain things for me to say like, hey, we had this conversation, we're on the same page. That way, if someone does forget, I can pull up the paper and say, hey, remember we talked about this and this is how we do things and this is the plan. And that's something that I never would have even thought about doing in the first few years. I would just get upset with somebody and then they would be surprised I was upset. But now I've learned some repetition, give people the chance to really learn and absorb the information, and then inspect it as well. Inspect, make sure everybody's, doing the plan. That's why I have a business, because I have a plan and I have a way of doing things. So I'm going to train my staff to do things the way that we do them. And that seems to be working really, really well. And my whole goal is to make their jobs as easy as possible. I want them to come in and experience music and share the gift of music with our clients. And that's it. Everything else, I'll take care of the business from there. But if I can get people that have the personalities, the talent, want to share music, that's all you have to really worry about. But there are the intricate details that I just have to remind people of, every so often to make sure we all stay on the same page.
What are some of the main challenges as you've grown and as you continue to grow, like even projecting forward? What are some of the main challenges you have faced, that you're currently facing, expect to face? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges we've faced, and this is kind of a good challenge, is how to create and find more space for what we're offering. We started out with a building, that first building I was telling you about that we found. We still have that building. We built 3 private lesson rooms, and then we had a large open room for dance classes and workshops and things like that. As the music business grew, we kept slowly building out that large open space with more smaller private lesson rooms. So that building that started with 3 lesson rooms eventually had 8 lesson rooms in it. And then we built out part of the lobby to add 2 more lesson rooms. So we have 10 lesson rooms in that building now. Because we were growing as a staff as well. We had more students, and to facilitate more students, we had to have more staff members. For more staff members, we had to have physical rooms for them to actually teach in and give lessons in. So just a couple of years ago, we also expanded to a second building in the plaza that we're in. And then just this year, we expanded to a third building in the plaza. And so we have 3 different units in this plaza now. 2 of them are mainly private lesson rooms. We have 14 private lesson rooms total, and then one is a big open facility that we have performances, rehearsals, productions, and things like that in. But the biggest challenge has just been how to continue the trajectory of the growth when you only have so much physical space. And again, that's a good problem to have, but you have to be creative as well, because like I said, not all the teachers are full-time necessarily. So you can't just go getting more buildings and more spaces, because the rooms have to be filled most of the time for it to be worth your time and your cost. So another challenge has been balancing out those 14 studio rooms that we have available with 20 plus different teachers, how to make sure that we're using the space effectively, how to make sure the teachers have a room that's suitable for what they need to do for their jobs. So that's been one of the biggest challenges, is coordinating where everybody is at what time and making sure that we don't just have all this empty studio space sitting around as well. So that's been certainly one of the biggest challenges as we grow. The other challenge I sort of alluded to earlier was the challenge of keeping everybody on the same page. As it gets bigger and bigger, you have to constantly communicate with the staff. So we do one really big, like, full team training event each year that's sort of like a big company party / training workshop. It's really grown to be quite a big event, actually. I joke with my staff and tell them it's my 4th favorite national holiday. But that's our yearly event we do in the summer. We call it AP Academy, Accurate Performance Academy. And that's sort of the retraining that we do with all the teachers each year. We remind them about who we are, why we do what we do. We do role playing. They practice giving lessons in front of each other. We share stories from the past year. We talk about what our goals are for the upcoming year. And it really has been an effective way to build the team. But that's another challenge, is keeping everybody growing and going at the same rate. Because if you don't do those things, you take off, and then you kind of realize there's a few people that are still stuck back in, old ways of doing things, or they're not up with our new systems and methods. So constantly communicating is just, always something to be reminded of when you're leading a team, at least for me, that feels much larger than it used to be.
Yeah. Hey, so Anthony, one more thing I wanted to ask you, something I'm personally very curious about. And you don't have to give away like exact cost or anything like that here on the show right now. We're going to have all of your information in the description. People can look you up. But if I was selling, let's say, cucumbers, for example, right? To determine that cost, I'm like taking into account, like, okay, if let's say I'm selling pickles, I'm going to say, I got to take into account the cost of cucumbers, how much time it took me to jar them and refrigerate them, and someone to go out and sell them and all that. You're in a service-based industry. How do you go about determining what the fair cost to your students is? Balanced with like what you got to pay your staff, how much it costs you for the facility, how much it costs you for the equipment. There's got to be a lot of things going on to determine like a cost. How do you go about doing that?
Fortunately for me, before I opened the business and involved other staff members, I was doing it on my own, and I had already had customers that were paying me a certain rate. So that was just expanded into the business. So we sort of had an easy starting rate. I didn't change my rates when I opened the business from when I was, driving house to house or teaching people in my house. So the rates were kind of just set by default, because we had established that prior. When it comes to staff costs and what they're paid, I did do just some market research on that and kind of figured out what a fair, good going rate was for that type of service. Also taking into account what our business expenses are, what the overhead would be, and to make sure that it would be something that could be sustainable and that could actually sail. Because the last thing I wanted to do was ever get ourselves in a position that we couldn't maintain affordability as well. So to answer your question, I would say the customer price was sort of a default from what I was already doing. And then the staff cost was just some research on, maybe what other studios were paying teachers and so on.
So with wanting to maintain that ability to, keep everything affordable for the business, how do you approach the decisions that you have to make when you're looking to take that next step and grow, and maybe looking at purchasing another building? How do you handle those kind of risk assessments in business development?
Personally, I'm just the kind of person that has to have sort of a cushion of comfort when it comes to finances. So like I personally don't borrow money on the business. Um, so I only grow as fast as our income will let us as well. So that's really how that decision becomes a little bit easier, is to know if we actually have the money and if it's a reasonable percentage of the money that we have reserved as well for projects like our expansions or building out the new building, things like that. We look at those things first, and then I project out, if I expand this space, how many new staff members can we hire? How many new customers can they handle? And I always figure out like what the maximum might be, and then I usually cut it in half. I'll go anywhere from 50% and then maybe up to like 70% if I'm feeling, optimistic. But I always assume that less is going to come in, so that when less does come in, I don't even feel it. It's just as expected and as planned. So I look at, again, how much money we have saved up and if we can actually afford to make a move or an investment, and then also what are the potential revenues coming in from that move that we're going to make. Because if it looks promising and good, then I'm happy to expand and go ahead and pull the trigger on something like that. Also, if I have the people to do it too, like over the years, some of my staff members have come to me and said like, hey, I have an interest in, recording music. Have you ever thought about recording our students? Or I do photography and videography. What about music videos someday? Or I love musical theater. Can we do a full-blown musical with our students? And I'm a very open-minded person and I love ideas. So all it takes is one of my staff members to show some interest in something. And I'm like, all right, great. Like, how can we make this a part of what we do now? And so having the people behind it is really helpful as well. Having people you can trust to pull off these new expansions and adventures and things like that too.
I imagine that makes your staff feel more like involved too, like the business is also like they're a piece of it, because their ideas are heard and even implemented. So is that kind of what this new production building is? It's like music videos and like musicals and things like that?
Yeah, exactly. Over the years, we've had just our private lesson rooms pretty much. And the whole point of having this newer open space is to bring all of our students together now, to perform together, to collaborate, to record music videos. We've had our concerts in this building. We have rehearsals. We've had our team training sessions in this building too. So it's been nice to have a larger space that we can really bring people together instead of just being one-on-one all the time in smaller lesson settings.
How has that helped like your students? Like how have you seen them grow because of that, or even your teachers too, with that new arm of the business?
Yeah, it's been extraordinary for the teachers, and I tell my staff all the time, like, just because we're doing these things, don't feel obligated to feel like you have to stretch yourself to new opportunities here too. Because I love that they teach and they teach really well. But for the customer or the staff members that are looking for a new opportunity or something to add, they've been very vocal about how thankful they are that we now do these newer programs also, because it goes beyond just the lesson classroom, in the sense that not only are they teaching their students how to play the instrument or how to sing well, but now they're creating a product that they can show for it, because they're recording or producing the students, and the students can now send it to their grandparents, or they can post it on their own social media, or we feature them on our social media. And it's been this really cool sort of community vibe going on now, where the students see each other and the teachers are around each other more, because it's not just private lessons. We have teachers now collaborating, where one will work the camera, one will work the audio equipment, one will produce the video. And so it's a nice way to bring everybody together. And the teachers have been very, very thankful for that opportunity. So that's something I'm looking forward to continuing to grow. And the students really like it too, because it gives them something to aim at. I hope we're good enough that you want to keep seeing us every single week for your lesson, but it's still good to have something to aim at, whether it's an upcoming concert or a music video shoot, or we're doing a songwriting session. Things like that help to give you checkpoints and motivate you along the way and keep you practicing and growing.
Definitely. That's really inspiring to hear too, because of that community element. I feel like that helps, students and teachers alike just really give it a little bit more of their all, because they have that target. So that's really exciting to hear.
And they can share ideas.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
They can share ideas together too. And that's really a fun thing, is when you bring them together, it creates newer ideas and newer opportunities because of all the brain power combined.
Yeah, definitely. So you had mentioned your social media and kind of these platforms that you're sharing these new experiences on. What other I guess, how do you approach your marketing? Is it strictly social media? I know in the beginning you said there's a lot of word of mouth that helped get new clients in the doors. How do you approach that now?
Yeah, word of mouth was the biggest way at the beginning. Like I said earlier, was just families telling their friends and their families about what I was doing. And that's how it was for a long time. But as the staff began to grow, I saw a responsibility on myself to get these schedules filled up for these teachers. And I looked at it as it wasn't just me anymore. I now had 5, 8, 10, 12 different mouths to feed now. And it's like, now I've got to market and get these people some customers, right? We've worked hard and I've taught them how we do things here. Now I've got to get them customers. So that's when I started becoming a little bit more intentional about, now we're going to actually market and advertise and not just rely on the referrals and things like that. So when it comes to marketing, one of the first things we did in the early days is we did radio. I think I didn't know much about marketing, and the radio people were the ones that happened to walk into my building and just catch me on like a cold call, but in person. And fortunately for them, they got someone that, really had no idea about any of it. So I looked to them I thought it was a cool opportunity. And radio is a good opportunity. And it really taught me a lot to be on that. But that was the first thing we started with. We did some events here and there in town too. Like there were some events that came to town, and we would set up a booth and talk about our lessons and do things like that. We also did some TV commercials in the earlier days. And then obviously in more recent years, we've leaned heavily on social media. And the social media has been really fun because we've been able to get creative and do a lot of that on our own now too. And so a lot of social media is kind of our main way, although we definitely utilize radio and TV as well. I prefer to be consistent with our presence in the community and with our advertising. So I will typically have something out there all the time, just so people are constantly, hearing our name and music lessons and the Accurate Performance School of Music. And when they think about playing the guitar, I want them to call Accurate Performance. And if they want to sing well, I want them to call Accurate Performance. So just constantly being present like that seems to really help. And then we're very thankful we still have a lot of good word of mouth referrals also.
Do you find that any of those channels have a better return on investment for the dollars that you're putting into it? Or is it just kind of maintaining that presence no matter what channel it's on?
I like to have a little presence on everything, no matter what the return is. If I see a good return, then I'll just invest more in that one channel. For example, for as big as social media is, there's still a huge impact from the radio and television. It's just, for some reason, that seems to really still catch a lot of eyes and ears. But I go with what's working. I mean, if I hear my customers saying, we saw you on TV, then I might lean more into the TV budget and do some more of that. Or if we get more likes or comments on a Facebook post, maybe we'll lean more into that for that month. So it definitely flows based on what I think is working. But generally, we have sort of a baseline of presence on various platforms, and then every month it's tweaked based on, what's going well and what we're looking for.
Gotcha. So I kind of want to go back just a little bit. I missed this question at the beginning of the interview, but can you share with our audience, you had mentioned, that first initial trying to get the building and kind of the dynamic that happened there with, the larger space versus the smaller space. But what else, when you were very first starting out, what other things did you encounter that you had to figure out to get started?
Yeah, first of all, it was a bit of a challenge. I mean, the plaza they were in is great, but it was a challenge to convince them that a 24-year-old should have one of the biggest buildings right in the center of the plaza. And so my realtor said, I'm going to go to bat for you here, but you got to write a good business plan. You got to walk in and show these people what your plan is. And I love a challenge. I'm competitive by nature. Like, I love to work hard and show people what we can do. But that was a challenge at first. Just getting the company to lease to me, because they probably thought maybe he's a 24-year-old, he's got this idea now, but in 3 weeks he's going to be moving on to something else. I have no idea what they thought, but it worked, and they let us do the lease. And another challenge was how we portray ourselves to the public now that we're an established an established business. Because before, again, it was just me, and it was still just me, but now I had a building. So we got our first sign, and it was a very, very ugly, perfectly large square sign. It was so awkward, and I liked it because I made it. But the landlord sent their manager down and knocked on my door and said, "Hey, like, what's up with your sign on our building?"
Really?
Yeah.
no.
And that was a first moment for me where I was like, okay, like, there are a lot of people watching right now. Like,
Wow.
this isn't just you anymore. You gotta make sure everything is, all the right boxes are being checked. So we took that sign down. We got a more professional, nicer looking sign. And but little things like that were just, it's not something I would have expected to deal with when I first opened. I thought, oh, I'll get a sign, it'll be fine, right? But no, they didn't like it very much. So I got a different sign. Some other challenges, this is another interesting thing, is I wanted the place to be really fun, not just for my students, but I wanted it to be fun for the families that were waiting for their lessons too in the lobby.
Okay.
I had a lot of families that I coached and taught that had multiple siblings taking lessons with me. And so I had this brilliant idea to go to Toys R Us, and in our lobby we would put like little kids golf clubs, and we had a basketball hoop that would go on like the bathroom door and with a foam basketball. We had a table with crayons and paper and coloring books that I would put out. And like, to me, that was a great idea. Like, what a fun place to be. You can play games while you wait. Well, in a matter of weeks, I go out there and like, the kids are like smashing the golf clubs off the walls, like hitting the ball as hard as they can.
No.
The kids are drawing on the walls with the crayons and color pencils I put out. So it's like, the furniture was really nice in the beginning, so I was so excited. I had all this pride in this new place, and like the leather would get ripped, and it's like, you learned very quickly that like the kids were pretty brutal on all the nice things we tried to have. So we had to pivot away from some of those things. As much as I thought it was fun to have mini golf in the lobby, it was quite a disturbance. Then we're trying to focus in the lessons, and it sounds like there's a professional hockey match going on in the lobby or something. So that was something else, was just another challenge to navigate, was like, how do you create that customer experience overall in a way that is pleasant for most people and sustainable and is fun but not too rowdy, those sorts of things. But again, you just learn along the way and make adjustments.
So I see the grand piano in the background there. Was that like a piece of equipment that you had to purchase when you first started, or was it mostly you had like your personal piano and other personal instruments? How did that go for you getting started?
Yeah, this piano behind me, we actually just got last year. This is one that we got just for our large studio space. The building I'm in talking to you right now is the large open space that I've been telling you about. The other buildings are more private lesson rooms in them. But this piano we got for the purpose of this room for concerts, rehearsals, recordings, things like that. When we first started, I kind of collected pianos. I say collected, but it was really like just 3 or so from just people that were giving them away in the community. I would go to these estate sales, and maybe I'd pick one up for a couple $100, or if it was a donation, I would take it. And then we moved 3 pianos into our building initially, and that's how that started. And then I always wanted a white baby grand piano, and in our first year, later that fall, I found one available about an hour and a half away, and so I got in the car, drove to check it out, loved it, and that came back with us then that first year. So we still have that piano. It's probably my favorite because I feel like it was like one of the OG pieces of equipment in the studio. So I have very fond memories. That's the piano I've played probably more hours than any over the last decade. So we still have that in the other building. But yeah, over the years we've just upgraded as we go. So the pianos that were donations that maybe weren't as high of quality, we would phase those out whenever we found something that was a little bit better. And just, it's been a slow building process of equipment and guitars and amplifiers and speakers, drum sets, pianos, all those things.
So you seem to have a pretty good, I would say, like even balanced head for business, even though you have all that passion. I like your approach to just kind of steadily growing, maybe not being super risk heavy, because you have a full team that you're willing to support. Do you look into any type of like personal or business development that help you kind of hone those interpersonal skills as you're growing?
I do. Yeah, I love podcasts. I love reading. I love books. So I learn a lot from those things. I think there was one day in the business when I was teaching an adult student of mine, And there was something in business that was just bothering me that day. I think maybe there was a staffing thing that happened or something. And usually I'm a very private person, and I don't like share a whole lot, especially to my students. I'm there to serve them. They're not here to hear about my stuff. But this particular day I happened to open up to this guy, and I was like, oh, like this happened. I'm kind of down about it or frustrated. And he opened up to me and let me know that he used to be the president of a very large corporation. And that was the moment where every lesson from then on out, we'd spend like half the lesson talking about business and half the lesson talking about his music. And that was really helpful to me to have someone that I could just talk to that had business experience. And he's really helped me to he's shaped a lot of, the current ways that we do operate and do things. And he's still a good friend, and he's still a student as well. But that was a moment of learning for me and learning from somebody else that was in business. I've done other programs in the past. Like I've gone to certain conferences that are business conferences for small or large businesses. And that's always nice to connect with other business owners, but also to hear the presenters as well. The presenters are there for a reason, and they always have a lot of knowledge to impart typically. So I do things like that, but my main source right now is just, I love podcasts and I love reading.
Do you have any favorites off the top of your head that you could recommend to the audience?
Yeah, I have one favorite podcast that I just love. It's called EntreLeadership, the EntreLeadership podcast, and it's created by Dave Ramsey, who was a financial guy originally. But it airs every Monday, and what's really cool is Dave Ramsey, the guy that started it, has over 30 years of experience in his business, and he takes phone calls the whole show from business owners. And it's really fun to hear the different phone calls that come in, the different situations the business owners run by him, because as a business owner, you can relate to so many of these things. Like, we're all going through the same stuff. It doesn't matter what your industry is or what your business is in. We all have the same things to deal with. And so hearing these phone calls and how he responds to them, I think he's got a lot of wisdom and knowledge that he can share. So how he responds and coaches the caller, I think is really fun, and I can apply that to my own business and my own situations too. So the EntreLeadership podcast is one that is pretty much my go-to on Mondays when it's out.
Nice. EntreLeadership.
EntreLeadership, yeah, it's a combination of entrepreneur and leadership. So
nice. I hear there's a new podcast out called Step Into Success podcast that people should check out too. It's got some pretty good information as well. Hey. But no, seriously though, so Anthony, let me ask you, what advice do you have for anyone who's maybe got a passion and maybe they don't even know if they should monetize it, or maybe they think, hey, should I monetize this? And they don't really know how. People kind of in that realm where you were, at one point, what advice do you have for people looking to get started?
I would say putting together a package of what you have to offer is a really good place to start. And meaning, like,
can you give us an example?
Yeah. So, you mentioned selling pickles earlier, your pickle business. Okay, your hypothetical pickle business, right? There's a lot that goes into it. You got to get the cucumbers. You got to do whatever cucumbers do to become pickles, or however that works.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right.
Get the jars.
If you actually had that business, you'd have to somehow portray to a customer what you're actually going to do for them, right? And what that process looks like. What's the step-by-step for what they can expect when they interact with you, when they actually give you money for something else in return? Like, what does that look like? So when I say putting a package together, it's like having your act together. If you had 30 seconds to share what you do and see if you can get someone to buy in, what would that package look like? What would that 30-second spiel look like? So get your act together would be step one. Like, what is your actual thing that you can sell, that you can do? And then another piece of advice is just something that I've learned over the years is you have to just keep showing up and you have to stick with it, because this stuff will not happen quickly. It's very difficult. It's not going to be an overnight success usually. You have to keep showing up. You have to stick with it, because there will be times when it feels like it's not happening or it's not working. But it's just something that I think if you have a passion and you really believe in it and there's potential, then stick with it. You got to just stay with it. So that's the other thing that I would say. Find out how to package and present it, and then go out there and stick with it and do it, or pick a period of time that you're going to commit to, that you're going to really push this thing or this new product or this new service, and then pick that period of time. And then at the end of that period of time, assess it. Is it going great? Cool. Keep doing it or grow it. If it's not, what can you adjust or tweak? or is it worth continuing, or is it not? But the other thing is when you have a passion or a hobby, it's fun to get excited about that yourself, but you have to remember that you're also there to serve other people. And how can you get them excited about it? Or how can you deliver and maintain their excitement? Because people call my studio and they're already excited about music. They want to play the guitar. But when they show up for their first guitar lesson, we have to actually be good enough and cool enough that they see a path forward. We don't want them to leave their first lesson thinking, wow, that was really hard and complicated and I don't think I can do this. We want them to see the potential in that. So that again goes back to sort of the package that you have to offer and how you present it. So presentation, some perseverance and sticking with it. I think that will go a long way in the beginning.
Okay.
Great advice there.
Love it.
So Anthony, just kind of as we're getting ready to sign off here, can you tell us what does success mean to you from where you started to where you are now?
Success to me means making a good positive difference in people's lives. And that's just me. That's just my own personal feeling on it. But I feel most successful, like at the end of the day, I'm most proud and happy with my job when I feel like that there's some people throughout the day that I spoke to or I coached, and that they're probably a little more excited about everything after we met than they were when we first met. And that to me is success. If we can make that positive impact, show them hope for growth in their music or just their life in general, I just love that. And that is why I do this stuff.
Awesome. So
Great.
we are going to put links in the video description and everything, but if you want to just give a shout out, where can people learn more about you and what you do?
The best way to find us would be our website, which is accurateperformancemusic.com. And then we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok as well at Accurate Performance.
Awesome.
Great. Anthony, love the conversation. Thank you so much for taking time to be here with us today. And we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
All right. Have a good one, man.
You too.